All right, it seems the stream is live. Instead of Jen introducing everybody this time, it's going to be me because Jen's moving. She wished she could join us, but she figured we would appreciate not hearing a bunch of movers in the background. You guys all know me from the last panel and from the lab last month. I'm Rio Veradenier. I'm the editor-in-chief of Queer Majority, which is an online magazine that partners with the Institute for Liberal Values. And Jen asked me to do one panel on queer liberalism, but I told her that it was too important a topic to just do one panel, so we're doing a series of them. And this time we've got 5 really great thinkers and writers here, and activists and other professionals and experts to speak on the subject. Firstly, we've got Helen Pluckrose. Say hi, Helen.
Hello. Nice to see you all. It's very late here, but it's a nice evening. Hello, Susanna.
We appreciate you joining us all the way from the UK. I'm sure it is very late for you. You must be having tea right now, I'm guessing.
I'm always having tea, Rio.
I almost made tea, but I decided to do water instead. Helen is, she's becoming a personal friend of mine. But apart from that, her bio I've got here says, Helen is a political and cultural writer, liberal humanist, and commentator. Helen co-authored the book Cynical Theories, which I've read, which is terrific, with James Lindsay, and also wrote recently the Counterweight Handbook. Her writing is focused on the evolution of postmodern thought into contemporary critical social justice activism, which she regards as counterproductive to the goal of genuine social justice. I agree. Helen wants people to value evidence-based knowledge, liberal ethics, and oppose authoritarianism consistently. Thanks for being on today, Helen.
Thanks for having me.
And the next panelist I'm going to introduce is Lewis Oakley, who has also written for QM. Lewis is one of the leading bisexual writers in the UK, recognized by the Pride Power List for the last 2 years running. He's the author of the book Bisexuality, The Basics, which is also terrific, and I've also read. When he isn't bringing national attention to LGBT issues by arguing with Piers Morgan or debating with Jeremy Vine, he can be heard co-hosting Bisexual Brunch, one of the UK's top-rated LGBT podcasts, which has also amassed a huge international following. He also co-authors the world's only bisexuality-focused advice column, Ask a Bi Dad, giving advice to bisexual people in need. Say hi, Lewis.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're also coming in from the UK, I take it.
I am. It's 10 o'clock here, but I am ready to go. I've had some coffee, and it's going to be great.
Coffee, yes, that'll work as well. Next, we've got Armin Navabi. Say hi, Armin.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you for coming. And where are you here from? You're also in the States, right?
No, I'm Canadian. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. You were in the States. I'm glad you corrected me on that. Armin is Iranian-Canadian, ex-Muslim atheist, author, and podcaster. In 2012, he founded the online free thought community Atheist Republic, a Canada-based nonprofit organization. Atheist Republic now has over 2 million fans and followers worldwide and hundreds of branches in several countries. You're almost like the Canadian Tucker Carlson, just less crazy. That's a lot of followers.
Yeah, I mean, that was a lot of followers until Facebook banned our Facebook page with more than 2 million followers.
No. Well, that seems relevant to our discussion. And it also has hundreds of branches in several countries. This is Atheist Republic, such as Malaysia, Indonesia, the Philippines, enabling non-believers to interact in societies where irreligion, apostasy, and blasphemy are often criminalized and repressed. That's incredible work. Thank you for doing that, Armin. As an author, debuted with the book Why There Is No God in 2014, which I have not read yet. And in 2017, he became a co-host of the popular podcast Secular Jihadists. So thanks again, Armin.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that intro.
Next, we've got Eli Viera. Say hi, Eli.
Hello, everyone. Nice to see you all. I've met Helen. We've been friends for almost a decade now. But everyone else, a pleasure to see you all.
Yeah, and
that didn't sound right.
Having published him a couple of times at QM. Eli is a Brazilian biologist turned journalist. It's an interesting transition, although I suppose a few others like Colin Wright have done the same. With a master's in genetics from Cambridge University, He founded the Secular Humanist League in Brazil, which is where you're calling in from, right?
Yeah, it's well, wokeness killed it, but I did found it in 2009. Yeah.
And he's spoken at the Brazilian Senate against affirmative action. His academic papers have been cited more than 600 times. Eli also helps translate QM articles into Portuguese, in addition to having written for us. You can find him on Substack and Muckrack, and the links for his Substack are in there. There's actually links for all of these people on The Circle and a few other places online where you can find them. Thanks for being on, Eli.
My pleasure.
Lastly, but not leastly, we have Joshua Eakle. Say hi, Joshua.
Hey, Rio. I guess I get to be the token American panelist today.
I know.
Looking
I
forward to it.
alone, but thankfully you're here. Although you're in Tennessee, or are you out on the East
Yeah.
Coast?
No, I'm in the deep South. I'm in the deep South, Nashville. So right there in the center of it.
I've never been to Nashville, but I've heard it's really beautiful.
Yeah. If you like drunk bachelorettes and hot chicken, this is the place to come. So
Also country music. So
that too.
I should come visit you sometime. All right. Yeah. Joshua Reed Eakle is a marketing executive, entrepreneur, and classical liberal activist. He's currently the president and chairman of the board of Project Liberal, a nonprofit organization committed to advocating the cause of a free and open society. Previously, he served as the director of marketing for Students for Liberty, the world's largest classical liberal student organization, spent over a decade as a political organizer, and he hosted a talk radio show. I didn't know about your talk radio show. What was that like?
Yeah, I was the host of a kind of a classically liberal perspective talk radio on FM in Knoxville several years ago, where I was basically I was the token libertarian kind of among group of conservative thinkers. So I basically got to go on air every night and basically argue with angry conservatives that called in from across the eastern part of the state. It was an interesting experience, to say the least. It was fun.
But I understand also the way that you guys use liberal at Project Liberal is not merely as a synonym for the Democratic Party, but it's for broader philosophy, which also includes some conservatives, would you say?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think we'll get into that a little bit on the panel, but that's absolutely the case.
Okay, great. All right. Well, I'm going to start by asking each of you to introduce yourselves in your own words and to speak briefly about a couple of, or one or two articles that you've written for us at QM and how that fits into the broader question and the broader mission that we all share of recentering queer issues and discourse on liberalism. So firstly, Helen, she's written two pieces for us. The first was The Perilous Pendulum Swing Threatening LGBT Rights. Can you speak a bit about that, Helen, and what you had in mind when you wrote that piece?
Yeah, so I've been looking sort of more generally at what I would call reciprocal overcompensation when not the normal kind of prejudice that can arise against certain groups because of their race or because of their sexuality, but we're also seeing the rise of a kind of new backlash essentially from the critical social justice movement, who have got people have got very sick of authoritarian trans activism in particular, and the backlash that is coming at this now is not coming at authoritarian trans activists, but at the people they claim to speak for, which it really includes everybody who isn't a gender typical heterosexual monogamous vanilla sex having person. So this pendulum that swings back and forth is it gets pushed out by the activists, and then if we push it back, then it's hitting perfectly innocent people in the face who are just trying to live their lives. So my argument in that was to not let that pendulum swing, to not push it back to this extent where you're not taking out authoritarian activists who are trying to control your speech and beliefs. You're taking out people who are trying to live their lives.
Yeah, thank you, Helen. I think that's a really good first topic to kick this off with. And the other one that you wrote for us, the other piece you wrote for us, is called Why I Stopped Discussing My Bisexuality. What did you mean by that?
I think that was because there's again this pressure from the politicization, where if a woman who has had relationships with women, a couple of serious ones, some casual dating, but have now been in an exclusive relationship with a man for nearly 25 years, there is this thing: what right do I have to consider myself bisexual? So if we're looking at this kind of political thing, nothing's affecting me. If all of the gay rights that we had suddenly went away, if there's a big resurgence of homophobia or biphobia, I'm perfectly safe. I don't have that oppressed experience, so I am not a legitimate. I'm no longer bisexual to a lot of people like this. And then, because if I don't mention that some of my past partners have been women, and I am also attracted to women, then I'm contributing to bisexual erasure. And this is generally, again, coming from the critical social justice movement, but it also comes from the right as well. There's a delegitimizing thing there, where apparently if I ever mention any of my ex-girlfriends, then I'm some kind of pretentious person trying to be a special snowflake and have an identity. But my relationships aren't an identity. They're people who I cared for and was attracted to, and who I had relationships with. So I want to try to get rid of some of this this toxic discourse around sexuality, where we can just say quite normally, yes, this is my husband, and I can mention, oh, this was my ex-girlfriend, we lived together for a while, we had this wonderful relationship, and this would just be a part of my history, a part of who I am. You don't have to load it with a lot of political or ideological stuff. It just is. And I think that's the liberal position, when it can be accepted that this just is, and nobody really needs to moralize about it. That's when we'll have got there.
Yeah, well said, Helen. I think that gives me a nice transition into introducing Lewis. Hi, Lewis.
Hello. Did you want to run through my articles, or shall I?
I'm fine either way. I was going to ask you, because you also wrote about bi-erasure for us, and I think you would agree with what Helen said about how toxic it is to accuse individuals of contributing to bi-erasure by not just doing what you do sometimes and literally walk around with a shirt on that says bisexual on it, which it seems like that's what it takes. So can you talk about, from a liberal perspective, why would someone care about bi-erasure, and how is that different from the critical social justice concerns and the toxicity and the accusations that Helen was getting at there?
I think for me, on bi-erasure, and I talk about this a lot in the article, and actually thank you guys for letting me run it, because whenever I talk about there being issues within the LGBT, people are always trying to kind of kill that article. But actually, I think for me, and from my perspective, when I was realizing I was bisexual and everyone's saying there's this big, loving LGBT community, and then I quickly found, well, actually, these people are horrible to me. Not all of them, of course, but that actually sort of, there was an attitude of, oh, I want equality for myself, but I'm not going to give it to you, and not smart rationing of resources when there are bisexual people making up 50% of the LGBT community, yet we're receiving about 1% of the funding. It made no sense. And so this article was all about the true cost of bi-erasure and kind of addressing how it's frequently overlooked. It's so odd to me. I'm always pitching articles. I'm always pitching myself for going to do TV and radio. And it's so weird to me that the left-leaning publications are the ones that kind of seem to say to me, oh, no one cares about bisexuality. That's been done. Everyone's just fluid now. No one's even bisexual anymore, which is wild. And then I get told off for going on to right-wing channels. So, but they'll actually listen to me. So it's a very odd space, I think, sometimes when you're bisexual, you find yourself in, and find that, gay and straight people don't particularly get you. Left and right-wing people don't particularly get you. It's a very odd space to navigate.
It's kind of analogous to being a liberal in an illiberal moment, it seems to me, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because another piece you wrote for us, which I just love the title of, is the moderate chads and the radical virgins. So everybody's talking about incels and their role on the right, but there's also a lot of toxicity on the far left right now. So what's that about? And can you maybe riff on being a liberal and being bi as both kind of being attacked from either side, so to speak?
Yeah, so this was all about sort of how much people are put off by extreme political views. But what was really interesting, there was some research out that some people were put off by, if you were to watch the Joe Rogan podcast, for example, people would be completely put off by you. So it was interesting to sort of figure out what people sort of deem to be extreme when it comes to dating. And of course, the majority of people would say, I just want someone that's sort of a moderate, someone that's sort of in the center. I don't really mind. But then I think in a highly politicized world now where it's sort of, it's weird. I think that maybe in the 90s, if you agreed with sort of 6 out of 10 things, you probably call yourself one thing. But I think we exist in a world now where it's sort of, if you don't agree with 10 out of 10 of these things, then you can't identify as this and you must be the complete opposite, especially where politics is concerned. And so you add that to the dating profiles and it's a messy situation. Let's say that.
Yeah, I mean, I actually feel like maybe we should open that up briefly to the panel because Joe Rogan is a very controversial figure. To me, what that speaks to is that there's a difference between what some people call the two online community, which I think we probably all of us here are part of. Some of us, like Helen, try very hard not to be. And those of us in the two online community, we see Joe Rogan as very mainstream and normal, but I think there are a lot of normies out there who would never spend 3 hours watching somebody interview some obscure professor or some that's being generous. He's also had some very kooky people on there. So to what extent is Rogan normal and to what extent is he liberal? I mean, obviously we're all pro free speech here, but where do you see, this is a question for the panel in general, where do you see free speech versus concerns about platforming anti-liberal voices if you have a massive audience and things like that?
I mean, I can kick off. I've just always sort of thought, let people speak. And if you have a problem with what they're saying, then you should be able to challenge them. And I don't believe in sort of saying you can't speak because that suggests that you can't argue with them and you can't put your points across. I mean, obviously I know it's only Joe Rogan and one other person, but you can still write an article about it afterwards or whatever it is. You can have your say. But I think it's important that I think it gets really scary for me when someone's deemed too dangerous to speak.
Yeah, if I may, I think the way I look at it, the two main pillars of liberalism that everything else was founded, like the two assumptions that we have at the beginning this is what liberalism is built upon, is skepticism and humanism, right? So skepticism with the idea that we are not certain what works. That's why we're for liberty, for a level of freedom, not too much freedom to the point that the whole thing breaks apart so that we don't have freedom at all because now it's absolute chaos. So we are for law and order and protecting the nation state, the framework where all of this freedom within it is possible. But beyond that limitation, everything else needs to be free enough for an evolutionary process, a Darwinian model, to be able for us to use as a tool to discover what works rather than announcing what works. We're not certain even in ourselves enough to think that the position that we're holding is the correct position. We're skeptical enough for us to let the ideas to be challenged in an environment where the best ideas will present themselves because they survive and they work. So it's not about this position is the correct position or that position is the correct position. It's like, let the system discover. We will discover the correct position, even if it's not our position. So it's grounded in humanism and skepticism. Humanism being the entire goal is the betterment of the human condition. But what way? We don't know. Let the market of ideas figure that out. So it's basically starts with the humble position of we don't know what works, let's discover that. So that's why I think we cannot point to this person and like, is this a liberal position or that's a liberal position? The liberal position is like, let the embrace the conflict, embrace the conflict between all these ideas. That's the liberal position. I think that's how I see it.
Yeah, I think that they're speaking to the marketplace of ideas. That there is because of the way humans work, there is always going to be a marketplace of ideas. That's what we do. We have ideas and then we try to sell other people on them. And liberalism is essentially the way of managing that without there being violence. So it's a very positive thing. So shows like Joe Rogan and other forms of what we could call alternative media, the anti-woke space, the atheist space, the gender critical space, the heterodox space, these have all come into existence because they weren't allowed in the mainstream marketplace of ideas. So, and now if we've got all these other spaces, if those spaces as well then start saying, well, we will talk to this person, but we won't talk to that person. If they start bringing in only people who fall very closely within their own sphere, then we're just getting little polarized sort of discussion points all over the place. And they're not really operating, as Armin was saying, as marketplaces of ideas. They're not crunching up against each other. They're not having their rough edges knocked off. We're not pushing out the bad ones to replace them with better ones. So I think anything, even though a lot of the alternative media, the sites I really disagree with very strongly, and some I don't think have much worth, I still would nearly always take the opportunity to speak to an audience who may not typically get to hear from somebody with my views, because I think that's how this should work.
Yeah, and that has been the strength of Rogan's podcasts. I have noticed he has been willing to have critics on and so forth. But something that comes to mind, for example, is like Tucker Carlson recently had that kind of fake historian on who said Churchill was the real villain of World War II. And he wasn't, quote, just asking questions or jacking off as it's criticized as, right? He introduced him as like the most honest and important historian in the world. and so I guess what I'm getting at is, obviously, we all agree that free speech and open dialogue is a good thing, and the marketplace of ideas is a good thing. But how do we counter a situation where so many people in the two online world or the heterodox world are perhaps overly skeptical, not just of mainstream journalism, which we should point out is free. We have a free press in the West, right? And it's not like it's all run by a Jewish cabal, as some people suspect. So when I see Trump voters citing Noam Chomsky as a reason to distrust the free press in the West, and then they also turn around and share Russia Today, and it seems to me that it really falls on individual citizens to take their civic responsibility seriously and not just be in extremist echo chambers. But one of the strongest criticisms of liberalism, often made from the fascist right, but also from the communist left, is that liberalism is inherently weak because we allow anti-liberal voices in the conversation. So how do we balance that? I think Joshua might have something.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you brought that up, Rio, because that's something I've thought a lot about recently. One of the things that I'd say underpins liberal thought, I think Armin kind of touched on this a little bit, is there's an intellectual humility, right, that kind of goes along with liberalism that I think makes it more difficult for us to combat false information and liberal ideologies. And mainly because, and I know everyone on this panel probably has the same experiences, one of the first things that I say before I try to go confidently out into the world is say, could I be wrong here? Could I be missing a piece of information? And it causes us to be slower. It causes us to, we're not, let's put it this way. We're not as united in our opposition to a liberalism as the liberals are united in their opposition to us. And we're also a lot more, we seek truth over everything, which means we're slower on the draw. So the way that plays out, I think, in our current kind of political conversation space, you say Twitter, for example, is there's all this misinformation and false information that's going out there, right? I mean, like Elon Musk every single day is boosting completely false information. And this is objectively false, right? But this happens day in and day out. It takes 10 times more effort to disprove a lie than it does to just make up a lie. So we're obviously dealing with a disadvantage A question that I wanted to maybe just kind of throw out to the panel, because I don't actually have an answer to this question, is how do you deal with platforms like that? How do you deal with a situation where you have a platform that's artificially being boosted to spread misinformation and lies? And I don't have a response to that, because I think my liberal instinct, just like everyone else in this panel, is say, open discourse, free exchange of ideas. But in this case, we have almost the opposite happening. And liberalism is at a disadvantage because we're facing people that have no respect for truth. And it is exponentially harder to combat those narratives.
I think Ellie wanted to speak for a while.
Yeah,
So
I was just going to say, just don't do it like Brazil is doing it, please. Because
yeah, no, absolutely. Brazil, you should. That's a crazy story out of Brazil.
And I think I see a connection here because this judge, Alexandre de Moraes, who ordered X to be banned in Brazil. So as you guys saw, I couldn't even post something to promote this discussion for a while. Today, I decided I'm coming back because the judge, he makes the laws as he goes. And now he's decided that only people who are heavy users of X will be fined for being on X. So I don't know what that means. So I'm there. And he also said that we are going to be notified by the federal police if we're going to be fined. So I'll wait for the notification and I'll tweet until that happens. But coming back a bit, I think people like Joe Rogan, he's a normal guy. I think he represents that Western consensus we had in the 90s. It was, I think, more liberal than what we're having now. So when I see him, I think his main problem, and which is much bigger with the other example you gave of that guy saying that the real villain in the Second World War was Churchill. I think this conspiratorial thinking, there is an epistemic side to it, which is. And I think it's a difficulty. I was thinking about this yesterday. I think it's a difficulty of telling apart what is probable from what is possible. So all of the conspiracy theories are possible, but they are also improbable, implausible. So there's that problem. That's about on Joshua's point on what to do. Well, I think community notes is a good thing. So as much as some people here might hate Elon Musk, I'm neutral, I guess. But even the Journal of the American Medical Association said it's a great tool for misinformation on the COVID example. So it's been successful. I wrote a story about that from my newspaper. So it's 97% accuracy on the notes, and it's much better than just taking things away. And to take another point that I heard here, I think one thing liberals have on their side is memory, because all this. So remember this thing. Remember when you were saying, for example, one example from Brazil. Someone said that the heavy rains in the south, many people died. It was terrible. Earlier this year, it was around April. So some people started claiming, well, these are artificial rains. Someone was using a plane to drop salts of silver to make the water coagulate and rain. So it was a crime, actually. So, okay, so what I can do is, I also write about science. I can come back to that and say, remember when you said this? And so instead of saying you're prohibited from saying this, let's ban you for saying this. No, let's just remember. So I think we need to empower ourselves to use memory, the opposite of memory holding stuff, coming back to them, following up on stories. All you had to do with this guy under the Churchill defamer was following up, because he refused to debate a peer from the House of Lords, right, who is a historian. He refused to debate the guy. So that says a lot, I think.
Yeah, it does, and we'll talk more about what's going on in Brazil when I get to your articles in a minute, Eli. This is actually a great way to segue to Armin's articles and recenter the conversation a bit again. Although I appreciate that digression. I mean, I guess what I'm saying here is, how do we balance the fact that we have free speech with the fact that we're all concerned about critical social justice, and we're all concerned about how the left has undermined faith in liberal values and institutions, and they're intentionally doing so through the public school system and so forth. But it seems to me that one way to push back against that is to point out that when you undermine the general public's faith in liberal values and institutions, that also empowers the illiberal right. And so I think a lot of what we're seeing on the so-called alt-right and so forth, and the ends of the horseshoe coming together against liberalism, a lot of what we're seeing is just that if you bring up a generation of people to distrust democracy and to distrust the free press and to distrust in the case of the United States, our legal system, the justice system, the Congress, etc. You bring up a generation of people to distrust those things. Some percentage of those people are going to be religious or conservative, and they're going to say, well, sure, great, let's replace all of that with my version of authoritarianism, and it's not necessarily going to be the communist version. So Armin, as you know, I believe that what we ought to be doing in the West is, instead of undermining faith in liberalism, we should be preserving liberalism, and where we really should be focusing on undermining existing systems and replacing them with liberalism is less liberal parts of the world, which Armin has written about extensively for us with his experience in dealing with Islamism. So Armin, one piece you wrote for us is called Pride Flags, Kid Gloves, and Islam's Religious Right. Talk a bit about that, and feel free to riff on anything I just said.
Before I do that, can I just respond to the points that you and Joshua brought up, because I've been really eager to respond to this, because you're talking about preserving liberalism and you're looking at all these challenges to liberalism. But I actually welcome these challenges to liberalism. I also welcome, and this might be weird to hear, but I welcome the misinformation, because these are challenges to liberalism. And if you want to preserve liberalism actually gets preserved when it's challenged. Liberalism needs conflict against it to be able to express itself and also to show that it works. I mean, if you go all the way back, why do we celebrate the liberty and the freedom of these challenges to liberalism to express themselves? One of the best people who defended this idea was John Stuart Mill. And the way he expressed it, which is beautiful, because all these other philosophers, they have this Kantian model which doesn't make sense to me. This is a utilitarian model, which always makes more sense to me. The way he expressed it is either you're right or you're wrong. If you're wrong, well, if you basically missed out on the chance to be corrected, obviously. But if you're right, you missed out on the opportunity to refine your arguments, to make it better, because these ideas, the best way to defend them is for it to be challenged, for you to defend it against an opposition. I mean, and you actually provided the best examples for modern days. You mentioned people who were saying Churchill opposed to the Nazis, that was the villain, or the idea, for example, for the free press, for that to be a good thing. Imagine if people weren't saying these things. I mean, we should be technically thanking these people who are spreading this misinformation, because if we weren't being challenged, holding these ideas would not be liberal anymore. We would be just believing in it in a form of, in a dogmatic sense. Like, oh, the Nazis are bad. The Nazis were bad. The Nazis were bad. It would turn into a chant. It would turn into a mantra. It would turn into a religion. We need people to come from time to time and be like, hey, maybe the Nazis were the good guys, for us to be like, hey, wait a second. If we don't get challenged, the whole idea of Nazis were the bad guys would just be a religion that we would just be saying it as if it's a prayer. Oh, free press is good. Free press is good. If we're not challenged, we would forget why we're even saying that. Why are we saying free press is good? We would just be repeating it because people before us told us that it's good. So we need some people to come and say to us, we should be thanking the people who are challenging this idea. For it every time, for us to have to defend that position, that is the liberal way. The liberal way is we don't repeat things. We actually have arguments for them. So I think, yeah, go on.
No, I was going to say, I totally get your point. I think we're all in agreement on that. And I think part of what you're criticizing is the fact that a lot of people who think of themselves as liberals, especially on the left wing of liberalism, have been unwilling to actually stand up on behalf of liberalism and challenge critiques of liberalism which come from Islam. So
Right.
could you speak about that a bit?
Yes. Okay. Well, I mean, I could talk more about the article when it comes to Islam, because the article that I wrote for you guys that I'm most proud of is the one that you titled. I mean, I didn't pick the title, but it's a good title. Saying by any means necessary, Iran, Hamas, and the left. Right. So that article, when I submitted it, you guys told me this is way too long. And I was like, it has to be long. It has to be this long, because the reason why I wrote this article is because I was looking for this article to share it, and I could not find it. I was like, what the hell? I was sure that somebody had warned the liberal West about this somewhere. And the more I looked, the more I saw that, okay, this is nowhere. I need to write this. And basically, and this was the time. So I'm an Iranian, and we Iranians have lost the country to the allegiance to the unity between Islam and the far left. I mean, back that was the communist left. Now we're seeing this. A lot of Iranians are looking at Europe, and they're feeling a sense of deja vu. And we're like, what the hell? This is exactly what happened to us, and this is why Iranians are the main people who are warning other people, warning Westerners to not trust don't use. It's very interesting because we saw exactly this happening in Iran right now. Wokeism, or I don't know what you prefer to call it, uses liberal language to take advantage of the popularity of liberal victories for it to be able to sell itself, and for it to act like as if all the victories that liberalism has managed to achieve, it's the product of its activism. But a lot of people cannot tell the difference between liberalism and woke ideology because they use similar language, right? Sometimes they use similar language, so a lot of people think that these are the same. But because liberalism gets power. Because liberalism works, liberalism is good for the economy, it's good for business, and that's why it becomes powerful. And the good thing, so the far right and the far left is very, very interesting. The far right is obsessed with power, and it's the idea, its principle is might makes right. So it thinks that if you have the power, you are correct, and the weak should be crushed. The far left thinks that if you have power, you're the enemy, you're the power, you should be crushed, you are the oppressor. And the weak are in the right, the people who are being oppressed. Liberalism, to me, has the perfect balance in between these positions because it celebrates might, it takes control, it becomes powerful, but then it uses that power to protect the weak. So it becomes powerful, but it doesn't crush the weak, it protects the weak. So it's a perfect balance between the far right and the far left. And this is why the far right and the far left both hate liberals. The far right hates liberals because they protect the weak instead of crushing the weak. And the far left hates liberals because they're powerful. And the far left hates whoever has the power, right? So, and the far left, so here's the thing. The far left hates power, hates the powerful because they see this as I think it's an inferiority complex and jealousy, and it tries to destroy any form of order or any form of power. The current powers that be is the world liberal order, which so happens the Islamists want to destroy as well. This is why they find each allies. I mean, right now, this is the far left is demonstrating itself in woke ideology. Back then in 1979 in Iran, it wasn't wokeism, it was Marxism. So Marxism was against liberalism. Islamism or Islam in general is against liberalism as well, because Islam has a more deep-rooted ancient hatred towards whatever is not Islamic. So right now it's identifying the non-Islamic world represented by the world liberal order. They don't call it that, they call it Western imperialism. But basically, Islam traditionally divides the world into Darul Islam and Darul Kufr or Darul Harb, basically House of Islam and House of war or house of disbelief. And now the both Sunni political theorists in Islam and Shia political theorists in Islam, they look at this whole divide the world into Islam and basically the world liberal order or Western imperialism. So their understanding is that they want the Islamic world to be like a bloc, like a political bloc, in the same way the Soviet Union was to the liberal order. Islam wants to be that. Islam thinks that the world has to be divided into the liberal order and Islam. And this is why they're so much against Israel, because they think the creation of Israel in the heart of the Islamic world has basically stopped that natural political bloc from being created. But because the enemy is the world liberal order, and Marxists back in 1979 in Iran, and now woke people in the West are against the same thing, against the same enemy, they are united. They naturally always unite with each other. And it's interesting because when the Marxists managed to help the Islamists in Iran to come to power, and the Marxists were the first victims of the Islamists coming to power. They were the first on the execution row, and thousands of them. Numbers say like in the 1980s, they say up to 30,000 of these leftists and Marxists and all these other leftist groups were being executed by the mullahs, because the leftists assumed that they could use the Islamists. Here's an interesting thing: the Marxists were using the Islamists as barbarians that they didn't believe in, because they thought that we don't have the military power to fight this liberal system, which was the Pahlavi dynasty back then, which they saw the puppets of the Western imperial powers controlling Iran. So the Marxists were using the barbarism and the network that the mullahs had through their mosques as a tool to crush the power. And then eventually they thought that they had the political know-how to control everything once they used the Muslims to take down the power. But eventually, when the Muslims were used by these Marxists to take down the liberal power that was controlling Iran back then Muslims were like, okay, why do we need these Marxists for? We could just execute them as well and get all the power for ourselves. So this is actually one of the most, the executions in the 1980s in Iran is one of the most forgotten mass executions in modern history that not that many talk about. Like thousands and people were executed, like all by hanging and firing squads. It was insane. It was insane. And not many people talk about that, which is now what's happening right now in Europe, mostly. Like if you look at in the UK and Germany and other places, these woke people, they have a hatred for nationalism, which is, a lot of people don't understand that nationalism is a product of liberalism. A lot of people, ever since World War II, everybody associates nationalism with the far right, but nationalism was something that was invented by liberals, especially civic nationalism. But the idea of a nation state, the idea of borders, the idea of law and order, which is all within the framework of a liberal ideology, these Wokistani Mujahideen people, far leftists, they are against all of that, but they themselves, they know that they don't have the power to be able to challenge any of that. So they see allies in these Muslims who are a lot more aggressive, a lot more willing to do things that these Westerners are not willing to do. They see allies in them, and they celebrate their victories over liberal, structures or liberal institutions or liberal powers, for example, like Israel, because they are doing the things that they wish. They have a revolutionary fetish over they want to feel like they're revolutionaries without actually paying the heavy price of being a revolutionary. So they try to live that experience through Islamists actually conducting paying the heavy price for being a revolutionary. And so that's why they're using each other for, even though they don't actually share the same goal. After the temporary goal is to destroy the liberal order, but what comes after that, to be fair to the Islamists, they actually have a plan for that. But for the Marxists, the Marxists actually, from the three anti-liberal powers in the world, which is the Islamists, the Marxists, and the woke, two of them actually have a plan. But I think the woke is so critical of any form of a framework or any form of objective reality or any form of anything that you could point to as a stable framework that you could believe in, that they don't even have a plan for what comes after. So the Islamists want, after they destroy the world liberal order, they want to bring either an Islamic caliphate, or if you're Sunni, or Islamic imamate. If you're Shia, the Marxists, they want to bring a communist utopia. But the woke, they don't even care. They just want to destroy for the sake of destruction. They just have a fetish over destroying things. I've never heard if they have no plan for actually creating an order after they bring the chaos. But anyways, I've spoken.
Yeah, you spoke about Iran. I mean, obviously that's all playing out with the conflict in Gaza right now as well, right? You see a lot of people on the woke left and the Marxist left defending the Hamas, who they might call the Palestinians, but really they're in effect they're defending Hamas because they believe that Israel shouldn't be there and that it should be run out of the region. And so you're seeing that play out. But I will point out there are lots of other anti-liberal movements out there, including right-wing ones. There's Christian theocrats in the West who unfortunately are being given more power as a consequence of the backlash against critical social justice that Helen brought up. And of course, there's, you say, Putinism and things like that. And you see a lot of people on the alt-right siding with Putin in his conflict against the West in much the same way that the left is siding with Hamas. So it's playing out all over the place. Go ahead. And move on to Eli.
The difference is, so I think liberalism is so strong against all its enemies. Woke ideology is a unique threat to liberalism. Woke ideology is from within. So I think liberalism will always be able to crush all its enemies, whether it's communism, Islamism, far-right fascism, whatever it is. It will be able to eventually crush it because it just works. Liberalism just makes too much money for its enemies to be able to defeat it. The problem with wokeism is that the call is coming from inside the house. It's within the countries that created and promoted the liberal ideas, and it just, for average people, it's hard for them. It puts a liberal mask on. And that's why it's like a virus that is corrupting the system from within. And also it opens the gates to the barbarians. So, Putinism, far-right fascism, Christian fundamentalism, I'm not afraid of those that much. Wokeism, opening the gates from within to the barbarians, that's the greatest challenge to liberalism. However, I do have to, one more, I know I've been speaking about one thing else. I know these are great challenges, but let's also be careful not to exaggerate the threat to liberalism, because liberalism has defeated much stronger enemies than what we're seeing today. Between 1933 and 1953, if you looked at the world map, you would have thought that the whole idea of liberalism invented by Enlightenment thinkers, since before the French Revolution, and it popularized after the French Revolution, it was a naive, stupid idea that some philosophers wrote on a piece of paper, and it was too kumbaya for it to ever work. It was stupid. Obviously, look at the world map. Most of the map of the world was dominated by Stalinism, by Japanese imperialism, and Nazism of Hitler and Mussolini. The world liberal order, the whole idea of liberalism seemed to be like, this is over. Most of the map has been taken over. But we see liberalism came back with a vengeance, with a force. And now, look at the world. We're like, oh, look at Europe. We have Muslims in the streets. Oh, look at wokes in the academia. Or in media. Oh, yeah. You think that's a huge threat to liberalism? Look at the globe. The whole planet is being run by this order introduced by, look at the economy, look at the banking system, look at the politics. Every country that you see has a parliament or a president or a prime minister. These are all frameworks. Look at the world trade. Look at the armies of liberal countries. We are in power. This is just a small bump on the road. We will crush all our enemies.
We want to stay in power, and you're quite right that it's dangerous when it's from within. I think
Yes, yes.
like Joshua and I in the States are worried that the backlash against wokeness is going to empower people who say, hey, the only way to preserve our Western culture is to embrace totalitarianism. And that is a problem. Helen, did you have something you wanted to say really quickly? Oh, I think you're muted.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of pick up on two things that Armin said, because he covered a lot of ground there. But the two things that I think sort of go together, when Armin was arguing that liberals should be pleased with even the disinformation, even the conspiracy theories, because we need that challenge. I would say certainly we do. For liberalism to work, we need that kind of friction. But there is a thing that's too much of a good thing. And I think that what is coming in at the moment with what Armin described as the no clear end goal for the critical social justice movement, or the wokeism, is because it is in essence postmodern. And so it is going on discourses, and it is rejecting of objective truth. And this is where the evidence-based epistemology is really essential to be a value alongside liberalism. Because while liberalism can have its marketplace of ideas and it can put them up against each other, if the ideas that are dominating a society don't have very much relation to reality, then the battle of these ideas are not going to be very productive. And so what we are seeing is, if we're seeing these kind of postmodern ideas, these building of narratives with no clear end goal, the work will never be done. We just have to change this, and then when we change that, we'll see what other discourses we need to change. And then we have post-truth coming in from the right, and this is mirroring so closely, often called the woke right, because it's that same building of narratives and discourses and stories. And so we're having increasingly a battle of narratives and discourses which aren't grounded in reality. So I don't know the solution to dealing with the number of the extremely bizarre narratives that are just being built on and accepted as true by swathes of society. But I certainly don't think that I mean, they're not the kind of friction that is helpful. We can't ban them, not only because it's illiberal, but because by doing so, that gives them more power, that gives them the power to say, we are the truth that they don't want you to know, the establishment doesn't want you to know. So we have to go at this. And I think that we have to get more progressives to understand that liberalism is how we have made progress. We need to get more conservatives to understand that what they are conserving is liberalism. And we also need to increase respect for evidence-based epistemology. Is this true? Have more people asking, how do I know this is true? And that is what we really have to work on the level of culture. And I'm afraid that is messy, with no clear answers, because humans are messy.
Yeah, ultimately, I mean, if our freedoms are going to stick around, it's going to be up to us. If we abandon the values that made these freedoms possible as a society, we will go the way of ancient Rome. I mean, that's just what will happen, and I think that's what we're all concerned about. You said we can't ban them, so that's a great way to segue into Eli. Eli wrote for us a piece called "The Brazilian LGBT Movement Loved Me Until I Defended Free Speech." So can you speak a bit about that, Eli?
Yeah, so, well, I think Armin really did cover a lot of ground there. I would like to reply to some of his points, but I agree with 90% of it. And one thing I agree with, especially, and it relates to my piece, is that I think wokeness, or critical social justice, I call it identitarianism. It's a mouthful, but that's the term I prefer. I think it's the most underestimated threat to liberalism now, even among liberals themselves. And that it has an ally on the anti-populists, who are the main force behind this push for censorship of disinformation or misinformation. And they are even making up terms like malinformation or whatever. And so how does that relate to my piece? I did fact checking before that became a huge thing and a new fad in the media. There is this the oldest and largest LGBT association in Brazil, the gay group of Bahia. Bahia is a state in the northeast. So it's run by a good historian. He has great pieces on the history of LGBT people in Brazil. But this side of his activism is dead wrong, I'd say. So he claims every year the whole of the media will give him a platform, as people say now, to say that Brazil is the worst country for LGBT on the planet. This is simply not true. We are quite tolerant, I can assure you. Despite Moraes, we are. And so I showed in 2019 with 4 collaborators that their statistic of people who were killed by with homophobic intent, that it was not true. We showed that only 9% of the deaths, it was 347 for 2016. We showed that only 9% were really cases of people who died by homophobes' hands. And this statistic, the exact statistic that I debunked, was cited by the Supreme Court when they did their judicial activism that they do daily now. And we have this law from the 80s that criminalizes racism. So both saying something racist and discrimination against people based on race. So they said that, oh, homophobia is a type of racism. So being gay, being bi is analogous to race. Well, in a sense, it could be true, but they're doing that because they cannot create the law, so they interpret it into a new thing, a very, very new thing. So they mentioned that exact statistic I debunked, including Moraes. He was already there. So that I think they talk to each other a lot. And Moraes, for example, when he banned acts, before that, a few weeks before that, so Glenn Greenwald, our friend, I guess, he showed that Moraes does not act according to the right, as they said. It's a great euphemism. So he violates our laws in his proceeding. He does fishing expedition against people he doesn't like. And who are these people? Bolsonaro supporters, the populists. Okay, so then they're bad. Yeah, they are enemies of liberalism. I'd agree with that. But Moraes is an illiberal force to quash them. And he goes so far into that I think it was my last tweet before X was banned, Twitter was banned. I said, are you guys sure that populism is worse than this? I'm not sure, because so when Bolsonaro was elected in 2018, people said, people on the left said, illiberal left, I'd say, they said, oh, so LGBT people will be genocided by Bolsonaro. That didn't happen. That didn't happen. Is he a friend? Well, and there's, he used to say, and I understand where they're coming from, because he used to say that if you have a gay son, you can beat him into being straight or something. So he was a terrible, terrible human being. He still is, but he's being reformed, so he's less terrible than he used to be. And during his campaign in 2017, he would even parade with this makeup artist who does makeup for his wife. And so he made it a point to show how he supported the LGBT, even though he would be against LGBT activism. That's what they usually say. And the main thing I did that, well, I was loved for a while by the LGBT activists, because you probably heard about this protest, on the streets against Moraes. Michael Schellenberger was there. So there was a pastor there. His name is Silas Malafaia. And he went on TV in 2013 and said, there's nothing genetic about being gay. And I was at the time studying for a PhD. It became a master's later in Cambridge. And I had already read something of there is a genetic basis. It's not the only thing that explains why homosexuality exists, but it's quite important, seems to be quite important. At least 20% of the variation is explained by it. So I made this video and it went viral. And at the time, video going viral 11 years ago, I bought a laptop with the monetization. So thanks, Malafaia, for that. So he's close to Bolsonaro. That's my point. And so it was, and this thing that Helen said about the evidence-based epistemology, it has to be the sister to the values, the moral values of liberalism. Because if we lose it, so there's no point to keep on arguing with the fake news or anything like that. So, long story short, I saw early on that wokeness, critical social justice, was distorting public discourse on LGBT rights and all the other identity-based rights. And I said, so people started by trying to use a legal basis, the way Supreme Court ended up doing in 2019, to try and censor Malafaia. And I said, no, that's wrong. I think homophobes should be free to be homophobes, to say whatever shit they want to say about us. And I became persona non grata. So, and those were important people who started saying I was an ultra liberal, so too much of a liberal to their taste. One of them was the second openly gay Brazilian MP. He's the second, but the first one was conservative, funnily enough. But he was a TV personality, and he didn't want to do anything for gay rights when he needed to. He never. So he was not a conservative who would preserve liberty, as we mentioned here. Yeah. So I hope I summarized it well. That's it.
Yeah, and it's a good example of why you can't and shouldn't use censorship to push back against illiberalism. I'd like to return to that topic when we get to questions later. I'll just remind everybody, more people have joined us since we started. You can ask questions on YouTube or on Twitter. And if you're watching us somewhere else, we might not see your questions. I apologize. But please feel free to type in a question, and I'll ask it toward the end when we get to the Q&A. Okay, so actually, Eli, you set me up well to introduce Joshua, or well, rather to introduce his articles for us. So Joshua, you were involved in libertarian activism, and you're kind of an economic right-winger like me. Sure. So we'll just put our cards out there. There are also lefties on here. But we all share liberal values, and you wrote a piece for us which really angered a lot of folks online, and then that's great because I got a lot of people talking. The libertarian case for LGBT rights. Do you want to speak about that a bit? And libertarians, of course, would not be pro censorship, would they?
Say that again. The libertarians wouldn't be? Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely not. And I couldn't agree more. Yeah, censorship is not the solution. Thank God for the First Amendment in the United States. I could say that's one of the greatest parts about our country. So let me start by some context for my background. So yeah, I'm a libertarian organizer. I spent 10 years doing that. I'm no longer involved in the party, but that's kind of what I did coming out of college and high school, was get involved in organizing in the libertarian space. I'm also in the Deep South in the United States, so I'm surrounded by illiberal right-wingers or MAGA populists and things like that. What I've seen in the United States, especially over the last couple of years, is a regression on LGBTQ rights. It's been overall a regression around tolerance towards LGBT people, but it's obviously a significant regression happening on the right. So there, we're seeing mainstream thinkers come out and talk about red flag laws to disarm trans people. Michael Knowles famously said he wants to eradicate transgenderism from public life. There have been prominent speakers talking about banning all transgender surgeries, even for adults, which is crazy. And then suppressing the free speech of people like drag queens who engage in story hours. So one of the things that I've seen in the libertarian movement is, we all know that, at least those of us in the United States that are involved in this, is that the Libertarian Party and the Libertarian movement were like first to market in the 70s with advocating for for LGBTQ rights. Or they were the first to push against LGBT laws. They were the first to endorse legalization of same-sex marriage. They were the first to push to end the don't ask, don't tell policy. So they've been long pioneers on the right. Right. I think libertarians, due to the kind of the Reagan coalition, kind of considered themselves on the political right. They've long been pushing for this. Now, what we've seen in the last 2 to 3 years is a complete regression. In the United States, this was one of the articles I wrote about. The Libertarian Party was taken over by this PAC called the Mises PAC, which was this very illiberal, MAGA adjacent organization that kind of came in. And one of the first things they did was start elevating some very illiberal figures and working to kind of scrape the tolerance chunk out of libertarian ideology. So I did write that article at that time. I know that article kind of made a lot of people angry because it was like right on the heels of this takeover, and there were all these fights happening in the libertarian movement. But, you know, this speaks to what I think is a broader concern. And again, this is me speaking as an American. In the United States, I do genuinely think that the biggest threat to liberal values in this political moment is on the political right. What I mean by that is there are obviously illiberal ideologies on both the left and the right. I mean, we watched this in the 2010s. The left was taken over by a very illiberal ideology. It started growing in a lot of strength. It was one of the mainstream things that was pulling the left farther and farther and farther to the left. But in the United States, we've got the most powerful military in the world, the most successful economy in the world. We are not even arguably, we are the most economically and powerful country in the world. And right now we have illiberalism that has taken over one of our two major parties. There are illiberal elements within the Democratic Party, but MAGA authoritarianism is a inherently illiberal ideology. And it has an opportunity this year in November to take over the entire country and hijack this prosperous, incredibly powerful society that is this liberal society of the United States and all the power that comes with that. So, and Helen touched on this a bit. There's a lot of postmodern elements. I mean, like the MAGA itself is like outright rejects truth. I mean, we talked about this with Elon and all these other things. There's just absolutely no care for truth. When we talk about Vance at a rally the other day saying he's going to make up stories about these Haitian immigrants in order to kind of help shine a light on this, this fictitious thing that he invented. It's just mainstreaming postmodern ideology on the right. So I look at that. And again, I'm also in the Deep South. So I look at this, and I'm living in it. I'm breathing in it. I see it as a very big threat. One of the things that I've written about in Queer Majority was what we saw in the Libertarian Party. I'll add one more thing to that. It's interesting because the Libertarian Party in 2020 actually covered the spread in several swing states between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And what we saw, and I kind of touched on this a bit, I've touched on this in a lot of my writing, is almost immediately after Donald Trump lost the election, this PAC was formed, the Mises PAC, that then exerted a massive amount of money. I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars to take over the Libertarian Party. Those of us that are involved in libertarian organizing know that kind of money does not show up in third-party politics very often. And when they succeeded, one of the first things they did with the next convention was platform, put Donald Trump as a keynote speaker. And they've since lost 50 state ballot access. The revenues collapsed, and the party is basically completely in free fall in the United States. It looks like they're going to be in a spiral of losing ballot access. So they did try to take over this party to make sure that it wasn't in opposition to their path to power. It looks like they might have succeeded in that for 2024. So that's the long and short of it. I think that brought me to you, Rio.
Yeah, I should clarify as somebody who's read a lot of Ludwig von Mises that he is definitely was a liberal thinker, and it's really unfortunate that the Mises Caucus named themselves after.
Yeah, I mean, he wrote a book called Liberalism. It is a great book.
That guy.
It's a great book. They definitely stand in opposition to a lot of the things that he said, for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. I think Reagan would be rolling over in his grave if he saw all this happening as well. I mean, we're seeing basically every living former president or vice president, including Trump's own vice president and nominee in the Republican Party, are, if not endorsing Kamala Harris, they're at least explicitly saying they don't intend to vote for Donald Trump. So it's kind of funny to see those people calling everybody else rhinos, but
it is hilarious.
Rhino stands for Republican in name only, for those of you who aren't in the States. And you wrote another piece for us, which perhaps upset even more folks. And it does keep us on topic of with queer issues. It's called the right-wing groomers who call everyone groomers. It's a bit funny, but what did you mean by that?
Well, this was good. This goes back to the Mises PAC takeover and what we're seeing on the right with this regression. There were many people within the Mises PAC when they took over the Libertarian Party. One of the first things that they were doing was calling, people like drag queens groomers and trans people groomers. That's something you hear all the time in the right wing space. The article, the reason why it pissed a lot of people off was because, as somebody who's been very close with finger on the pulse on this organizing for a long time, what I realized was a lot of the people that were very high up in that organization, and a lot of the people that are in this kind of right-wing ecosystem that spend a lot of time aligning and attacking these trans people, or collectivizing them, throwing them all into one camp and saying they're all groomers, were in fact themselves groomers, right? Like Mises PAC endorsed a convicted pedophile or a convicted child pornographer for state legislature. They endorsed somebody who was convicted of sex crimes against minors for governor of Pennsylvania. They platformed Scott Ritter, who is a convicted pedophile and UN weapons inspector. There were plenty of people in their orbit that were engaged in, either were arrested for crimes against minors, or were involved in just very weird apologetics for this weird anarchist philosophy that communities should decide when children are ready. Just some very odd stuff. And this is kind of a microcosm of this bigger thing that's happening on the right, with things like Roy Moore being a mainstream political figure that was obviously involved in abuse of, or at least alleged to have sexually assaulted minors. Matt Gaetz. We talk about Donald Trump's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. We saw what happened with Mark Robinson, who was attacking transgender individuals. And then it found out yesterday who the endorsed governor of North Carolina was himself writing on message boards about how much he was into trans pornography, which is just, it's absolutely a hypocrisy, right? And that was one of the things around that article. It's very controversial for obvious reasons, because again, it kind of shine a light on these things that they didn't want to shine a light on. But I think it's important to point that out. A lot of the times these accusations can actually be confessions for some of these people. And I think that, you can't speak to the intention behind each one of them, but a lot of the times these people put on a mask, this kind of MAGA populist, MAGA authoritarian mask. And it speaks to a deep insecurity with their own beliefs, and it speaks to there's some serious underlying moral failures that are happening in that political side of the United States.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to segue into the Q&A portion of the panel. While we wait for a few more questions to come in, we've got a few so far. I'm going to ask you guys these are all questions for the panel in general, although I might suggest certain individuals weigh in. And then I'll move to the viewers' questions next. But this is riffing on the anti-populist topic that Eli and Joshua both touched on. Nobody's really explained what populism is or why it would be a threat to liberalism yet. I can speak to that, but I thought I'd let someone on the panel go ahead. Maybe Helen? Oh, Helen, you're muted still.
I mean, I'm not sure that I'm the right person to speak to populism, because I have a sense that it's coming, it's manifesting so very differently in different countries. But what we're seeing quite strongly, particularly in the UK at the moment, is of course this very strong skepticism of any form of expertise, this a very sort of paranoid narrative that liberal elites are running the country. I am apparently funded by the WEF and or Bill Gates or possibly George Soros, depending on which day it is, and it's unclear what it is I'm meant to be doing. But the creation of these kind of post-truth narratives, and particularly, I mean, Trump was the ultimate populist, and this is what we're seeing more and more is that people are no longer really afraid of of it being revealed that what they have just said is not true. So we've always had in my lifetime a kind of consistent thing where politicians certainly lie, and activists and ideologues, that they lie, they distort things. That this kind of creation of entirely unbased narratives that are coming up now, and particularly I think a very good example that I've been addressing is when an incident happens, a shooting or something, and then we saw particularly in Bondi in Australia. First of all, people rushed in to insist that it was Islamists, and they got photos of the guy in shadow so that he could look a little Middle Eastern. And then somebody else, I think, must have gone on to LinkedIn and just searched the most Jewish name they could find until they found someone with a similar hairline to him and insisted it was a Jewish extremist, even though the guy was clearly about 20 years younger. And of course, the man in the end turned out to be neither, and to come from a background that suggested he was Catholic. But the thing with these narratives, as they arise, is that nobody foresaw any serious consequence for being wrong. There was no anticipated embarrassment. There was no hedging of any bets, because what was more important was that they had said the right thing for the right narrative. They're not going to lose any support. And I think that is what is underlying populism on an ideological, on a psychological level, is very much is, are you telling the right story? We care very much less about whether it's true, as to whether it is the story that is supporting this narrative. And in the US, yes, it's these narratives that are targeting certain groups, that are kind of raising and escalating the fear that we need authoritarian strongmen, that's Trump apparently, to kind of to keep these people down and protect us. And that's also what we're seeing a lot of in the UK. The gender critical movement has had a big insurge of populist. They're not really feminists, but it just is this sort of dragging of gender critical views now towards this populist. We're being imposed upon by these systems, and so often I get into arguments on the issues, and someone will say, I'm working class and I've just worked 15 hours and you went to university and you're bullying me. And this is I think what comes down, this narrative is coming down to at root. But this is still a very sort of broad brushstroke sort of discourses and psychological levels. So I think probably the way that sort of populist narratives are actually operating within the political sphere is probably much more Joshua's department.
Well, yeah, I was going to just really briefly, I'll just chime in on this. The way that I look at it is authoritarian movements very often, almost always, start under the guise of populism. The real danger of populism, as I see it, is populism has this tendency to speak to humans' tribal instincts. So it's everything is either this elite shadowy group, whatever that might be. So for the right, it might be immigrants, it might be these gay people or whatever that are, or these LGBT people that might be trying to hijack your children. On the left, it might be the ruling class. Whatever it might be, it hijacks the human tribal us versus them mindset, and it gives people a silver bullet solution. So the way that I like to look at it is the reason why populism is dangerous is because it inherently rejects the truth of reality, which is that we are all individuals with our own kind of interests and desires. And it tries to put us in these boxes and then otherize us and turn us into the enemy. And if we just tear this group down, whether it's immigrant, whatever the group is, we solve the problems. I think that's the problem in a nutshell.
Can I ask you a question regarding this? Because I can hear the other side speaking, like if I want to play devil's advocate, right? The other side, which you call them populist, they might say, we're not being populist, you are being elitist. You elites call the results of democracy, when you don't like what democracy has chosen, you call democracy populist when you're not happy with the results. That's what you elites do. And basically, you liberals act like you care about democratic principles, But when democracy gives you somebody that it wasn't your choice, all of a sudden, instead of calling it democracy, you're saying this is against liberalism, and this is a populist, not a candidate that was chosen through democratic means. So how would you respond to that?
Well, I think it's quite clearly both. I mean, this is the issue with democracy, is that we can both say that somebody has been legitimately democratically elected and that they shouldn't have been, because this was a terrible decision by the public. without any contradiction there.
So you created a liberal framework, which democracy is part of it. And you're calling the results anti-liberal, even though it came about through the process introduced by liberalism?
Yeah, that's those two levels. Liberalism allows for people to choose illiberal ideas and express them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Joshua,
So
did you
answer
that question? Or
yeah, Joshua, do you want to say something?
Yeah, no, I would say Helen was kind of going with it where I was thinking, which was exactly that. Yeah, like liberalism can tolerate illiberalism, and in a liberal framework, there is the possibility that we will see ideologies and differences of opinion. Illiberalism does not tolerate liberalism. I think that's the major difference, is that you will see things come out of a liberal society that are illiberal, that are wrong, that might be. I don't think populism is inherently wrong. I just think populism is it can send you down a dangerous path, right? There are much worse strains of populism. And I think populism as a concept can create, because it manipulates the psychological influence of humans, can lead to bad outcomes, right? I don't think it inherently is a bad thing. But yeah, I think that's just the nature of a liberal system. And it's on every one of us in this chat to kind of combat that and to talk about why that's dangerous. And I think that's the beauty of liberalism, is the openness to different ideas.
I'm gonna.
My understanding. Yeah,
go ahead. Go ahead.
You want to? Okay. I just want to see if my response, what you guys think about it, because my understanding of liberalism is that liberalism is actually a limitation on democracy. It doesn't. There are some principles that it doesn't leave to the majority to decide on. So there's the populace, the people will pick some things, but there are certain things that are off limits, and those are. That's why it makes a liberal democracy is a republic with some limitations on democracy. So liberalism actually contradicts absolute democracy. But the thing is, what are those principles and how do they come about? Because if the population decides, like if liberalism provides a room for the populace to choose certain things through voting, the things that are off limits for the people to vote on. For example, people can't vote on to bring in execution of gay people. We're not going to vote on that. Or to bring back slavery. You're like, okay, no, these are liberal principles. We're not going to be voting on that. Well, then who gets to pick those principles that the population doesn't get to vote on? And that's why some people who want to challenge liberalism, they kind of suggest that, oh, who made you God to decide these principles? Like,
right.
If it's not through a democratic process that these are being chosen, are you the elite? So this is again the challenge between elitism and populism. Is actually another conflict which I don't think there is a certain answer to, and these two groups need to be fighting each other. This is why I like liberalism is actually the embracing the struggle. I don't think there is a right answer. I think the people who consider themselves elite enough to choose this principle, and the people who are the general public who want everything to be up for voting, they have to be fighting for their own domain, and the right answer will always again come about with the struggle and the conflict between these two groups. But go on, Ria.
Yeah. Okay. I'm glad you continued, because that's where I was going to head. I don't think of populism as illiberal because of the outcome. I don't think there's anything illiberal about allowing a populist to become president or whatever. What I see as illiberal is it's a rhetorical style that's used by people like Donald Trump, and it's based on a myth which just takes a hatchet to everything about liberal society. It's this myth that in the case of the liberal West, it's this idea that we don't live in a real democracy, these constitutional protections of individual rights against majoritarian rule are unacceptable, anti-democratic impediments to what we want to do. And therefore, we need to put in a strong man who is going to tear down those institutions so that we can get the will of the people. And the reason I call it a myth is because we do live in a democracy, and the constitutional limitations that we have are quite reasonable, but also we have democratic means for changing them through an amendment to the Constitution. And there's no need to tear down liberal society. And when you replace it with an authoritarian dictator, the idea that you're going to get your way, even if Trump's dictator for a little while, eventually he'll die, and then we don't know, the next dictator might be a communist, right? So you never know who you're really going to get. And to Helen's point, which I guess also relates to what you're saying, Armin, and I agree with this, liberalism is about channeling the inevitable conflict, economic conflict, political conflict, through institutions like capitalism and democracy, because it's a way of taking that conflict and turning it into something positive and productive as a consequence. And so it's a myth, because they say the elites don't want us to get policy. On the left, they say elites don't want us to get universal healthcare in the US, for example. But the reason we don't have UK-style universal healthcare yet in the US is not enough people want it, right? So in a way, that's actually anti-democratic, isn't it?
But you are saying it's reasonable, and I actually agree with you. But maybe populism is supposed to grow, because if we have these liberal institutions and these liberal principles, and me and you are saying they're good, they're working, don't challenge them. But at the same time, are we sure about that? I mean, if enough people are getting angry, then maybe some of it is not reasonable. Maybe rise of populism is to challenge that, so that we could look into them, and maybe it requires some conflict for us to re-examine parts of it, at least. Maybe this is how we get to have this evolution continues, by sometimes populists challenging these principles and us taking another look at it and seeing maybe we need to make a few changes here and there. Or else, why do we have this many people angry? But go ahead, Joe.
I want to just, again, very briefly, I think you're completely correct. Liberalism inherently is going to create populist uprising because of the dynamism of liberalism, right? You're going to have winners and losers. So when you're having a dynamic economy, some people are going to get ahead, some people are going to not get ahead. It's going to create that dynamism itself is going to create dissatisfied segments of the population as your society economically progresses. And so I think that inherently creates populist waves. The key thing that I think about, though, is because throughout history, I mean, we've seen waves of populism come through liberal society. The key thing for me, though, is when we're experiencing a populist wave, there needs to be a liberal response to address the core roots that cause the populist wave, to your point. And we need to make sure that populism doesn't get so powerful that it destroys the framework of liberal society that allows us to function and solve these problems to begin with. I'm sorry to cut you off, because I think Helen had a point to make on that as well.
I was just thumbs upping your point, because that was the point that I was going to make. A few weeks ago in the UK, we had a series of riots, and I would say, and I'm sure we would all agree, that attempting to set fire to mosques and migrant hostels with people inside is a very illiberal way to express your anger at how immigration is being handled. We can nevertheless see a lot of people who are not actually trying to do anybody harm, who are expressing dissatisfaction with the Conservatives who had the fatal Rwanda plan, which never got anywhere, and not addressing concerns. So we can see those concerns, and we can say that some of these concerns, that we certainly need to address them. Whatever people are concerned about need to be addressed, but as Joshua was saying, they need to be addressed in liberal ways. But
I think one thing that's not really... Sorry, go on. Oh, I think one thing that's not really been talked about in this discussion, though, is the sort of decline of living standards as a lot of people see it. So you can have your beliefs, you can be a populist, you can be libertarian, be what you want. But I think in a lot of countries around the world now, there are a lot of people that are seeing their living standards decline. They're seeing that actually I can work 5 jobs. Well, it certainly feels like it. You have a lot of people that will say, oh, well, I'm working 2 or 3 jobs and I'm still struggling to pay my bills. There is a lot of that going on, especially in the UK. It's like, oh, I can't afford a house, I can't afford this. And I think what they look at most of all is their parents, that actually their parents were able to, do it on one job and get a house and all of this stuff. And I do think that then feeds into a lot of the things that have been talked about, which is people say, well, this system just doesn't work for me, so I want to look for something else. Like, what else is it?
But the living standards are only declining if you're zooming into a very small, like your time horizon have to be very small for the living standards to being. As soon as you zoom out a little bit, look at multi-decades. I mean, people just remember only like the last decade. If they zoom out and look at like the last 50 years, everything is improving. But I guess people have a very short-term memory, and they just.
Well, I think also people have rose-tinted glasses. They look at the 70s and the 80s and stuff, and they don't remember that they had blackouts or whatever it was. But what people do know is that, oh my God, my parents bought a house for £50,000. That same house today is worth $250,000. And actually, I'm never going to be able to afford that. And a lot of people now that are maybe getting into their sort of 30s and things, that are saying, oh my God, I can never afford this. What am I doing? The system doesn't work for me. Why are the rich over here getting more rich? And I think that it adds to this sense that people feel like this system just doesn't work. And that then feeds into their values maybe go a bit skewed.
I want.
That's absolutely right, and that's a measurable thing. And I have pointed this out. In 1992, I earned £5 an hour as a care assistant, and I had bought a flat for £26,000 was what it was. Last year, I earned £10 an hour, and that flat sold for just under 200,000. So people, other care assistants, they're not going to be homeowners. Now, the libertarian response to this is flood London with housing. That will bring down the costs. That will enable people to buy homes. And yes, this is an approach that we need to do. So if we're getting people being rightfully angry that over half of their salary is going to rent and getting on the housing ladder simply isn't a possibility, then a liberal solution to that is going to be a market one, which is going to be build more houses.
I was going to say the exact same thing, because in that, I honestly think that almost all of this economic dissatisfaction, because to Armin's point, global living standards, and especially in the West, this number is different, but the global living standards of the last 40 years have increased by like 250%. I mean, global poverty's collapsed. And in the United States, at least, wages are now rising faster than inflation. There's some dynamics to look at with COVID that throw that all in question. But I actually think housing is actually part of the reason why there's so much dissatisfaction. And to Helen's point, the reason we have a housing crisis, at least in the United States, and I think, I gather it's the same in major cities in the UK, is because we have inherently rejected liberal economic solutions to the problem. We've got all these zoning boards that are restrictive. There is no market innovation. There's no market factors. It's like artificially manipulated and controlled by these kind of NIMBYs that show up at city council meetings in the United States. So I always like to say that the solution to that problem, it's caused by liberalism. The solution is liberal economic policy. And then that can fix the problem. It has in other markets and other industries.
We're starting to see that happen too in California, where I live, a very deep blue state. Of course, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's liberal in the philosophical sense. Finally is allowing people to build second and third homes on their properties and rent them out and things like that, which I think will be terrific. I'm about to say
the problem. The problem with that is that it's hard to sell that to people, because the idea is that don't do anything. The idea is like, let the market decide, get the government out of it. And people don't like that solution. People think like, no, there's a housing crisis, government come fix it. But that's actually the source of the problem. The government is trying to fix it. So we have to find a way. The main weakness of liberalism is that the strength of it is that it works. The weakness of it is that we have a very bad marketing team. Everybody else is doing a very good job at branding their ideology, whether it's Islam, Christianity, far right, far left, communism, every wokeism. They are doing good at marketing, but we're not doing good at marketing because we assumed, why market something that is working? it will just it just works. Like, look at it, it's working.
Yeah,
we need something more. We cannot.
Definitely check out Joshua's Project Liberal, which Helen and I are both on.
But that was what I was going to say.
They're marketing, they're branding liberalism and rebranding it and remarketing it, and they're doing a great job.
There's still a lot of work to be done, but I couldn't agree more. And we talked about this earlier in the conversation. Liberalism, at least in the West, has kind of been the background noise of our politics for a very long time. And I think after the Soviet Union collapsed in the 90s, liberals just kind of forgot how to argue in favor of their ideology. And they almost forgot that they need to claim it, and they need to brand it, and they need to represent it. And I think with the rising populism in this moment, the threats to liberalism that we see on the far left and the far right, it's like now is the political moment for people that believe deeply in liberal values to kind of claim their identity, make their identity ascendant, brand it the right way, and then go to war against illiberalism. And then we can have that free exchange of ideas, and liberals always win in the end. So I'm not too worried about it. Because
we need that coalition of center left and center right to both come together and do it. And it needs to be in both parties. So I'm very happy to be part of that. I will say, so we all agree that censorship is a bad way to fight illiberalism. What are some alternative ways to doing that? That's my last question for the panel. And then I'll move to the Q&A.
I think populism is based on this idea that the hierarchies that we have, the pecking order, is unfair. And in that, it approaches the far left. Only 3 years ago or so that a social psychologist started talking about how the left goes authoritarian. And they've started doing these tests, these objective tests, well, maximally objective. And one of the main points is whether you want to use violence against hierarchies. So that's the authoritarian left approach. And so I think one way we could do that is to say, well, we've been talking about populism as though it's only on the right, but my current president here is a left-wing populist. And I recommend to you that The Economist does a great job at showing how Latin America is held down by these Marxistoid ideas from the left. And that's considered, you said, oh, we need the center left. But here, what is the center left? Well, there's a lot of illiberalism on what's considered center left here. There's a lot of, atavism, Marxist atavic, old-fashioned ways of thinking about economics. So liberalism is already counterintuitive, and when it gets to the economics, even more so, I think. So we need education on the economic side, because I think a lot of people who support this side, it's a type of vote buying, because there's always something to say to people. Oh, if you elect me, I see this here. I'm in a small town where I grew up. Only 6,000 people will have elections next 6th of October. And I see the politicians using that rhetoric. Oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Where is the money going to come from? So people forget that it's their own money they're talking about. So, and I had this conversation with Helen, because Helen was thinking, oh, Eli is going too far into, he's getting more to the right and conservative. And I said, Helen, you have to understand the context where I live. We don't have the perks that you have in a country where economic liberalism has been the law of the land for a century or more. So we need that side here. So there's a part of that is educational. But we also have to show, especially when this populism comes from the right, that be careful with this. You're sounding more and more like a revolutionary here, Bolsonaro. Are you sure you want to sound revolutionary? I think all of our hierarchies, it's not all bad, but it's hard to defend that because, if you go into academia, the hierarchies of thinking or the media is 90% illiberal left here.
And maybe Lewis wanted to say something.
Oh.
Yeah, I was just going to come back to your question about censorship. I don't have an answer for you, but I can talk through some of the points on it. I think when you think of censorship, we have to kind of think of how the technology has just kind of jumped in the last 10 years to enable everyone to have a voice. And as someone that is liberal, it's so weird how much I go backwards and forwards in my mind on whether social media was a good thing or a bad thing. And I think, I was listening to a speech the other day someone gave, and they were saying, tempers weren't so fired up like 20 years ago because people didn't just, put out their every thought or in their emotion. If they were angry, say I write a piece for you guys and someone's angry with me, they can in the moment read the headline and comment on it and be really mad. And that's their free speech, and that's fine. Back in the day, they would have had to get out a piece of paper, write out that they were angry, probably make a spelling mistake, so write it out a second time, walk to the post box and post it. And by the time they got there, they would have probably calmed down. So I do think as well, a lot of what we deal with day to day online is people's immediate instant emotion that might not be something they care about 3 hours later. And I think that is important to think about in this discussion as well. Because if we're talking about, oh my God, there are all these ideas and stuff, it's like, yeah, but probably half of them will calm down anyway, 3 hours after kind of whatever they've posted. And I think I've seen that a lot, sort of on the flip of this, is what I personally feel I've seen a lot of, and I won't go into names, obviously, but there are people that can sort of lead a lot of the LGBT movement online without ever have to leave their house now. And some of the times when I have maybe met these people, I'm thinking, my God, like you've never had to deal with anyone that thinks differently to you, because everyone that follows you agrees with you and everything that you post, they love. Whereas I feel like I have had been dragged through the back alleys, kind of like speaking to people, having them disagree with me, hearing them out, all that kind of stuff. And I feel like, in the 80s, maybe that was the kind of activist that led movements. It was like, I have to hear other people out and be liberal. There's no other way to do this. So I'm not going to bring people with me otherwise. Whereas now you can sort of sit in your bedroom and, amass more followers than probably all of us put together without ever having to deal with a viewpoint you didn't like. And I think that then when those people have power and they're saying, well, I think this and I think that, and it's like, I don't know, it's a weird one because everyone is entitled to their free speech, but I do think we have to at least always be thinking about just being able to speak to the world instantly is probably not the best thing.
Yeah, I like that. Armin, you were going to say something?
Yeah, you were saying, what should we do? I think that one thing that we're missing is that we have a list of don'ts for people. Don't censor. Don't get the government involved. Don't get in bed with Islam or wokeism. Okay, but we don't have enough do's. And I think people are looking for do's. People are looking for guidance and like, okay, like these are bad. What do you have for me? Right? And I think that when it comes to selling liberalism, many of us don't understand why people pick their beliefs. We think that people are looking for beliefs that match reality or are the conclusion of some logical analysis. But if you actually look at most people, when they're picking their beliefs, if the utility of the belief is not to explain reality as it is to people, the utility of beliefs for people is usually an identity card and a membership card, right? They choose the beliefs, not the ones that most accurately explain the world to them. They choose the belief that feels good when you wear it, like it's a fashion, like as an identity, or that it's a key for you to a community that you feel like you belong in, right? And when we are selling liberal values, we keep arguing to people like, hey, look, it's working, it's working, it's working. I'm like, okay, what do you have for me? Like, what do I like? Are you giving me an identity that I could be proud of? Are you giving me a community that I could come in, that I feel like these people are welcoming me in? And the best framework so far that we have provided that to people is like nationalism, because it's within a liberal framework, and that it competes with other, maybe religious identities or ethnic identities. National identity it's within the liberal framework. But again, national identity or being a patriotic or nationalistic, that mostly gives you a political identity or a political community that you could join in. But unlike these other identities, it doesn't get involved much in your personal, individual life. It doesn't provide any sense of identity there or guidance over there. There's a lot missing. And I think we need to provide a more complete framework. I think it's a lot of people think a lot on the rational and not on the emotional. I think it's irrational not to consider the emotional aspect of this of marketing liberalism, and I think that's where we need to come up with it. Yeah, go on, Helen. Sorry.
I think liberalism does. What liberalism does is protect people's right to have their own beliefs and to have the things that are meaningful to them. We're just not going to tell them what they are. It's not that because I'm a liberal, I don't have any positive beliefs. Liberalism has that one negative thing. As you say, it has no you musts. It has one you must not impose your stuff on other people. So I am a left wing economically. I am a humanist. I'm quite into Norse mythology. I like to get together with things like that. Somebody else might be a Christian, or they might be a Muslim, or they might be patriotic, or they might like knitting. It doesn't matter. Whatever it is, we're going to protect your right to do that, because as soon as liberals tried to give people an additional positive moral structure, we've also have to protect their right to say no, thank you. I don't believe that, and that doesn't appeal to me, and that's right. What they're going to do.
Yeah, but the thing is that's true. I completely agree with you. The beauty of liberalism, this is also it's a strength and a curse at the same time, right? The beauty of it is that it allows a whole bunch of different pathways and self-expression and identities for you to go with. So that's why it works. But at the same time, we're dealing with humans are social animals that are tribal, that our brain is wired in a way to look for a guiding hand, to look for a set of beliefs or a set of identities or communities that provides guidance. And but liberalism protects that, but protects whatever you choose. But whatever you choose will give all those feelings to you. But because liberalism doesn't provide that itself, you don't get that feeling.
The idea of shared values. It's not going to happen. Any time in history, it has never ever happened. I mean, my area of study is late medieval England. Everybody was Christian and had to be the same kind of Christian. And what happened? We have 45,000 denominations of Christianity, and people, different kinds of Christians, like to kill each other more than they like to kill anybody else. The beauty of liberalism is that it does protect your right to branch off, to have different ideas. It's so enticing, this we need to get people together around shared values, around a common good, but that isn't how humans work. Nice idea.
That's not what I'm that's not what I'm arguing for. I think I'm not explaining myself very well, maybe. Okay, I'm not suggesting that we should do anything else. I'm saying that so I agree with you, right? And this is the beauty of liberalism. But communicating that requires a logical explanation to people, and logical, like a lot of people are not in, like if you want the masses to buy into something, and logical explanation might work with like academics or other people sitting here on this live stream, or people who are listening interested in this debate. But the masses, the people, they are shopping for feelings, right? And I'm not suggesting that we should change liberalism. Obviously, what you're saying has worked, right? But within that framework, what is the trick is how not to tell people to do something, but give them that feeling that somehow there is a guide here, right? And I think
yes,
the trick is to sell liberty and freedom to make your own path as if that is the guidance. Do you know what I mean? Like, we want people to choose their own path, but they're asking for guidance at the same time. We don't want to give them that guidance to how to live their lives, because we believe in individualism. We believe each one of them should live their own individual. They should go on the path of self-discovery. But we could repackage the idea of, hey, here are the tools to develop your own, to find your own path, as if that is the guidance, as if that's the guidance itself. That would be the marketing. But go on, Josh. Sorry.
No, I could not agree more with what you're saying, at least in the broad strokes. What you're basically saying, and this is the way that I think about it, is humans need a simple story, right? They need some sort of narrative to kind of drive them to say, what is the theory of everything that I can kind of tie down into my put on a shirt and say this is my team. And you and Helen, I think, actually agree on this in a lot of ways. And Helen, correct me if I'm wrong and mischaracterizing what you're saying, but the simple story of liberalism is liberals are the ones that believe in expanding human freedom. We have taken freedom from what was the monarchs and all these, these institutional actors that were above human, and we basically expanded human freedom. And at the center of the liberal philosophy is we simply just believe the real value that ties us together is that we believe more people should have freedom in their lives. And that's the story. And I think that if liberals could articulate that, one of the things that we're working on is actually trying to draft a manifesto to this end, to say, look, this is the liberal story. The story is not about pushing some ideological niche. We've solved all the problems of humanity by believing in humanity, by giving humanity the tools to make decisions for themselves. And that's the liberal story. And if we can brand that in a way, I think we can really combat those ideologies. And Helen, I'm not sure if you have any thoughts on that, but
yeah, I'll certainly help with that. And I think Adam Gopnik, 1,000 Small Sanities, is going to be your...
You were the second person this week to tell me to read that.
It's perfect. It's absolutely perfect for that, and I'll gladly help with that manifesto. But yeah, I think that's true. But I think also when we're thinking about liberalism, this, yes, we do need to, in some sense, have a collective identity that we want to rally people around. But then at the same time, we're also kind of on that overarching scale. We're looking at liberalism versus authoritarianism. So we are going to people wherever they are and saying, hello, you're a Christian. Please, can I persuade you to practice your Christianity in a liberal way rather than authoritarian way? You're a Muslim. Can you please be that in a liberal way and not an authoritarian way? And that's that other level of it. And yes, that isn't that inspiring, but there are also things we can do within that. So we've had people in sort of LGBT communities say to Christians, I will defend your right to think homosexuality is a sin. I've had liberal Christians say, I believe homosexuality is a sin, but I will absolutely defend your right to make your own life choices and oppose anybody who tries to stop you. Now that's powerful, and that's what I want to try and get together.
I think some things don't need to be repackaged. Every religion is very diverse within itself. So I've had this conversation recently with my mother, who's a Christian. I think she won't mind me telling this. And she was very mad at something sacrilegious that she saw. And she had this impulse that, oh, they should be silenced. They should be stopped. And I said, as a good Christian atheist, I said, remember, don't throw the first stone, or whoever is without sin throws the first stone. So we owe something to Christianity, okay? Thomas Jefferson made it a point to redo the Bible without the miracles, right? So there is on the separation of church.
That's not Christianity anymore.
Yeah, so, Armin Hirsiali
packaging.
Yeah, well, I agree. Like it was a religion that had to be one of the points of the Enlightenment was to tame it, right? So and Armin Hirsiali makes a point to say, well, there is this version of Islam that is great, and the problem is the Medina Islam.
There's no version of Islam that is great.
Well,
there's absolutely no version of Islam that is great.
That's why she's a Christian.
I don't want us to get sidetracked on that debate, although it's very difficult of us to do so. I really like all of your answers to that question. In a way, I feel like you all kind of summarized my own view, which is that I do think we need to do something, and censorship isn't it. What we need is liberals need to reclaim certain ideas like national identity and patriotism even. And I'm really happy to see liberals in the United States doing that right now. And I think we need to de-wokeify education and just put back normal liberal civic education that teaches people about why democracy is amazing and why liberal democracy is amazing and why Republican democracy is amazing and all of those things, so that people have a sense of pride about their system and want to participate in it. So I'm going to very quickly go through some comments and questions from our viewers. Anybody who wants to comment on them or answer them can feel free to weigh in. Giovanni Ciano says, 1 point for Joshua for calling it Twitter and for all he said. Yeah, I'm always happy to dead name Twitter.
Always, never going to be X.
And then we've got Kings of Cringe asks, and I see Eli, you kind of answered this in the YouTube thread, but for the sake of our viewers, most of whom are not on that particular channel, does a genetic component matter though? The born that way argument is often effective emotionally, but it's a red herring and leads to very disturbing, flawed logic. I think that's a great comment and question. What do you guys have to say about it?
I think
Yeah, I
red
agree, but
herring
it
is
still
too
needs to be
much.
made.
Yeah, I already answered, but to summarize my answer before Armin gives his, well, a good moral actor has to be well informed about facts, right? So I think that helps him or her achieve good answers and prescriptions, right? So of course, David Hume established that what is does not follow from what ought to be, or vice versa. But I think it's a very interesting relationship that they both have. And as I said, I think, and Helen also said that the epistemology of evidence is quite important to help the liberal values stand up.
Yeah. I mean, you could just quickly say like, well, but it is partly genetic, but who cares? Even if it wasn't, it's not harming anyone. I mean, I wish it was true that it was not partly genetic. Then maybe more of us could experiment with it and try it out. So yeah, why not?
Like I say, it is a sort of superpower. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to comment on that one? Okay, we've got, I don't think I can pronounce this. Sikimos says, I strongly disagree with Eli. Bolsonaro strengthens a group of illiberal conservatives, illiberal like the wokes. Do you want to comment on that, Eli? Or anybody else?
Yeah, I think there is this boogeyman that is made out of populism. I think we've done a good job of discussing it here today, and just look at it as it is, and not as what some other illiberal people want it to be, to justify their own illiberal acts. That's what's happening in Brazil. Bolsonaro is no longer president. Moraes is the clear and present danger, and he's doing that in the name of combating populism. That's so. As I said to this person, I never said Bolsonaro is a liberal, even though he did say that in an interview. I hope, if only it were true, but it's not. So yeah. So what's happening now is this. I think the as we say in Portuguese, the remedy is worse than the disease.
I've got a comment from Raimundo Espectro. Every day, the left and the right promotes their most radical people to the political spaces. Does anybody want to comment on that? Is that true? To what extent?
If you don't mind me briefly commenting, I can speak to the U.S. perspective. I'm sure it's different in everyone else's countries. But I mean, I'd say that it seems to me like in the political environment in the United States right now, the opposite is happening on the left. I mean, there's a moderation happening right now on the left. Like we saw a rise of left-wing populism with like Bernie Sanders and the AOCs and the Rashida Tlaibs of the world. Those people are not running the Democratic Party. And in fact, the liberal elites, as we might pejoratively call them, are the ones that are kind of the mainstays in the Democratic Party. So like it's a good thing. I think everyone on this chat would agree. It's probably a good thing that Bernie Sanders is not running the show on the left. Otherwise, we'd have a much different situation in the United States, but we don't. That was not always the case. I actually thought the trajectory was going to go the other way a couple of years ago, but I don't see that. I actually see Kamala moderating and moving towards the center right now, which I think is a very good thing for American society, but that's just from an American perspective. Whereas the right is doing the opposite. I mean, it's getting crazy.
I guess I could comment a little bit on that from the media perspective, because I do a lot of broadcast work, and you might think that I'm always on TV, but trust me, that's sort of a third of what I'm offered, because a lot of the time they want people to come in and really argue strongly one way or the other. And actually it's a really hard gig to be sort of liberal and sort of want to hear both people out. when you do what I do in the media, because it's kind of like, no, we need you either on this side and as far to that side as you can go, please, or that side and as far as you can go, please. And I do think when we're trying to have these reasonable discourses, when you do have a media system, and not all media, but a media that knows that the more extreme of a view or story they can get generates more clicks, generates more engagement, and two people that really oppose each other screaming at each other for 3 minutes gets more views. Although I think that's changing, because I think, you know, things like this and long form podcasts, I think people are kind of wising up to it now. But I think that's probably why it comes across that way, because there's a lot of people trying to get clicks or trying to get their shows watched.
Great. Yeah, that was well said, Lewis. And I'm in the States, so I don't get to see you on TV often enough. But whenever it gets put on YouTube or something, I try to check it out. All right, we've got a question from Stream Stress. What do you think of the Teamsters situation? The union heads are communist and at odds with the union workers. Are you concerned with the communist organizing going on within unions? And they also recently basically endorsed Trump, which is interesting. So maybe Joshua or someone else can speak to that.
I'm not familiar with the nuance of the American unions and the way that they are run internally, but didn't the Teamsters not endorse anyone? And then the states, the swing states, just endorsed Kamala. I think that's what, just to say that.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry.
No. Trump
was full of the rank and file. And
yeah, that was what I thought. Trump came out and said it's a great honor that they didn't endorse me, which I thought was hilarious. But then I think Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania's state level Teamsters unions just endorsed Kamala. So take that as you may. But I can't really speak to the nuance of how those are run internally. So maybe not super valuable there.
Okay. Does anybody else want to speak to that?
Nope.
Okay. Let's see. What else have we got here? Oh, you like blah blah. Cringe. Kings of Cringe again. The UK arresting people for tweets and wrongthink and hate speech seems more illiberal than someone vandalizing a religious institution after children are being murdered. Wow, that's a heavy statement. I mean, they're certainly both illiberal. Which one's more illiberal and why?
It's more illiberal to commit violence than it is to ban speech. But fortunately, we don't have to choose. I've been addressing for 15 years the illiberalism on the left. So when illiberalism is coming on the right, and we have a murderer who is Christian and born in Wales, and then people are attacking mosques and migrant hostels. I mean, this wouldn't have any ethical basis, even if he had been a Muslim immigrant, because, as we know, within liberalism, we are about the individual. That young man who appears to have been in court rocking is responsible for his own actions. So we don't have to try to balance things out and always feel as though you have to defend. If I am saying that quite a lot of the rioting that was going on, the injury of police officers, of fire trucks, the terrified people trapped in a building as people were trying to set it on fire, is definitely illiberal. It is definitely intolerant. We can't tolerate it. This doesn't in any way diminish everything I have also said about the takeover of institutions from the woke left.
I just want to add something to it. I do generally get more concerned when liberal values are being threatened from the government. You know, like when you have a bunch of hooligans, you're always going to have some people violating the laws, and that should be, liberalism is in favor of the rule of law. If anyone is burning down a mosque, they should be arrested. It is a concern, but if the government is arresting people for their speech, I mean, they're both red flags for me, but one of them is a much bigger red flag to me, because that's liberal values being challenged from the government, right? So, and I also, Yes, exactly. I do also want to agree with Helen regarding, obviously, burning down a freaking mosque is illegal and should be cracked down upon, and those people should be punished. And anybody who is threatening any Muslims' safety or security, they should be arrested or challenged. I do want to also add to this that most of the protests against mass migration in the UK were calm, civil. I mean, the leader of the protest, Tommy Robinson, like one of the main leaders, has been insisting all the time on keeping the protest peaceful. Most of these people are patriotic people who are just concerned about Islam, spreading in the UK, about mass migration, against they're concerned about the border integrity, about defending the liberal values, the Western values of the UK. So I just want to make sure that those people who are burning mosques or attacking Muslims, they do not represent the vast majority of the protesters who are rightly concerned about their nation state. I mean, being patriotic and being nationalist and defending your country is basically a liberal principle. And I just want to make sure that we don't frame the entirety of those protests based on what some of the writers,
that the whole liberal principle is let people believe, speak, live as they see fit, provided they're not harming anyone else nor denying their freedoms.
Right.
So we don't even have to agree with Tommy Robinson, and I absolutely don't, to agree that as long as he and his supporters are speaking and they're not hurting the people and they're not denying their freedom, as obviously trapping them in a building is, and throwing bricks at them, then they must be allowed to speak. People should never be arrested for holding a placard or shouting something. We've just had a ludicrous coconut trial in which a woman was put on trial for holding a placard calling the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary coconuts, which in the UK indicates brown on the outside, white on the inside. And fortunately, she was rightly acquitted. So we have got this nonsense going on, and we really have to keep that line between belief, speech, living as you see fit, and harming others or denying their freedoms.
Yeah, so I agree with what you said, except the part that Tommy Robinson and the people and his supporters, they are not for throwing bricks at Muslims. They are not for burning down mosques. That's why if you actually look at his speeches when he was marketing his protest, he was constantly talking about keeping it peaceful. He was constantly thanking the police. He was constantly asking people to keep everything lawful. Tommy Robinson has many Muslim friends. Many Muslims support him. In the UK, support him. He actually famously saved a Muslim from a false accusal of him being part of a grooming gang. He went out of his way to save that Muslim man's life from the false accusations that he was getting. So I just want to make sure that people understand that, so a lot of the people who are participating in these protests in the UK, they're not for taking people's freedoms away. They are actually for against mass migration. They're not even anti-migration. Tommy Robinson himself said he's pro-migration. He's just anti-illegal migration. He's anti-mass migration. He's anti-unfiltered migration. And yes, those people that you mentioned that are burning, like attacking mosques or attacking Muslims, they should be called that. I just want to make sure that as liberals, we support protests as long as they are not violent. And many of the people in the UK protesting and showing their concerns against mass migrations, they're doing it in a peaceful, legal way. But you're right, we should call out the people who are being violent. They should be called out. They should be arrested. They should.
And anybody else that we disagree with, we can disagree with, and think that their
with protest
are illiberal, or just write them. I mean, we can't get into, and I really don't want to at 10 past midnight get into the subject of Tommy Robinson, but I would disagree with the fact that I should stay at home and have children and try not to think. That's definitely a view of
Tommy Robinson say that?
Oh yeah, I'll send you it. He spoke about the problem with feminism and the need for women to stay at home and have children. That's the main reason.
I disagree with him.
The feminists got quite annoyed with people with feminists, the gender critical feminists attending the march. But I really need to go to bed, and I don't want to go on about Tommy Robinson. If we can just, as I think we agree. People who are marching, and including Tommy Robinson, marching and speaking, and I absolutely defend his right to say whatever he wants about women's roles in society as well. That we defend those. It is the doing of harm or the denying of freedom that we don't.
Yeah, and I'm just going to say one line. Not gonna. I disagree with you. I completely agree with you. Tommy Robinson has many other views that I disagree with. He's a conspiracy theorist. He thinks 9/11 was an inside job. He believes in a whole bunch of other wacky stuff that I disagree with. If that's his position on women, I also disagree with that. I was specifically talking about his views on migration, which I think most of it makes sense. But his other views, there are so many other things that I disagree with. And if he believes that as well, I disagree with that as well. So thank you for telling me that.
So
Oh, what happened?
So we have gone long. I've got one. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, break up. Yeah.
You got this.
We've gone long, and we need to let poor Helen go to sleep. I'm sure Lewis would like to as well. So I've just got one question left here. I mean, there's more, but we'll do one more. Read free speech. Do we draw? Where do you draw the line? Distinguishing from experts and the layman question. No doubt all should be able to speak and listen, but not all opinions are valid. What happens when you have to refute BS?
That's the role of free speech.
Refute it.
The role of free speech is you are free to say the lies, and you're free to call out lies where they are. And I think that's the beauty of free speech.
The best way
you let the government decide what is true and what isn't. That's where it gets really dangerous. Sorry, Armin.
The best way to no, I'm just confirming. I'm just agreeing with the best way to fight bad information is with good information. That's the best. That's the best tool you have. There's no other way.
Okay, well that was very quick. And in conclusion, Stream Stress again made a comment saying, the far left has said queer means against the system, and they keep saying they want Marxism instead of capitalism because capitalism creates inequality. So if we have a conception of queer which is liberal as opposed to woke, what would queer mean to us from a liberal context? And that'll be our last question for the panel, and then we'll close out.
Let's just answer quickly because Helen needs to go. Queer, queer for me just means that daring to be different, daring to be your own weirdo, and F whoever doesn't like it. So, right.
Ditto.
Right? Is that good?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Exactly. It's a matter of what you do about that, right? And the liberal approach is we think it's wonderful that everybody's individuals and that we believe that everybody is better off living in a free and pluralistic society. And by the way, cis straight people also benefit from sexual and romantic liberty. That would be my answer. But yes, she's quite right that queer theory in academia, unfortunately, tends to be very woke. The academics on the panel can help us with that one. All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for coming on. You were all terrific panelists. All of their articles are very good. And this whole talk will be available, not just live now, but it'll be posted, edited with their article titles cut in and everything. So I definitely recommend you follow all of these people and read all of their articles at QM and everywhere else, and also all of their books.
No, thank you so much.
Thank you
It's
for
been a
having
pleasure.
us.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.